Hey again, this is Dr. Flight. We're going to spend a moment or two looking at some unique challenges that nonprofits have when it comes to product development and offers that are created. We'll begin by looking at a traditional exchange theory model, which is true and valid for profits and nonprofits, and really any organization where we have an exchange between the firm or the organization and the market as a whole. So that really underlies a lot of the idea of products and value. And so we'll look at that briefly, and then we'll talk about three distinct challenges that nonprofits have in being able to communicate and deliver and really define, if you will, products or the value that they're creating for the consumer. So unique value then challenges for nonprofits is what we'll focus on here for the next couple minutes. All right, so we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about value and the value proposition. So within the organization, really any organization, um, it can't be stressed enough as how important the actual offer is or the product is that we're going to make. You know, consumers, clients, the market, they look to solve problems as, from whatever we can offer them, in the marketplace. And that offering then defines who we are relative to how well it solves, consumer or client problems. So the amount of time and effort we spend on developing and creating and managing our offer, or if you wanted to call it a product or service, is absolutely paramount. We, in marketing, summarize the offer as something called a value proposition, which is pretty much, if you think about whatever the customer comes in contact with in terms of our brand or our product, when they use our product, the price they pay for our product, the benefits they receive, the features they get, those are all elements of the value proposition. So we think about the tangible product itself, the services and service surrounding the product, the brand, the image that they receive, the perceived benefits that they're receiving as a result of that service or tangible product, the price they pay or the other costs they have to incur, everything, in other words, associated with the the offer and what the client perceives to be associated with the offer is a part of the value proposition. So those are all things that we need to want to control. Now, a lot of this is rooted in something we call exchange theory. So we'll just real quickly look at exchanges. And when we think of an exchange, it's a place where clients and nonprofits come together and where they interact. It's where a service is received and paid for if there's an exchange taking place. Now, nonprofits are a little different because there's not always a financial exchange that's as clear or clear cut as what we see. So the nonprofit, in other words, brings a product or a service to the marketplace or the exchange, and somehow that there's money that is provided either from the client or from a donor. The client may also, though, have some other costs like time, energy, reputation, things of that nature, which they have to give up. But the idea is the nonprofit produces something of value. That something of value is paid for, and both parties receive some type of benefit. Now, the nonprofit's benefits are often the objectives that they have established as a result of their mission. Their mission focus is what's driving the product and service. And secondary is the actual money that they receive as compensation for the exchange or for the benefit that they're providing. So the objectives then of the nonprofit become important, and they may not necessarily be financial objectives like in a for-profit organization. The client receives some type of value, and we traditionally define value as benefits and cost. So in this case, the cost the client has to give up is probably associated with their time, their energy. They have to give up a former behavior, then that's a cost. So if we want somebody to stop smoking and we want them to use our 12-step program to kind of stop this addiction, then they're going to have to give up behaviors that they had previously engaged in. They're going to have to give up time. They're going to have to give up some pride, probably. They're going to have to humble themselves and realize they have a problem, and the whole idea there. So those are all costs then that the client is incurring. And again, the nonprofit has to receive money to cover their costs, but the benefits that the nonprofit receives are that somebody maybe doesn't smoke anymore, and that meets the objective that the nonprofit had set forth. So the costs that, or the money that is exchanged, would be money from donors, maybe money from the clients too, but money that comes in to cover the operational costs and the objectives or the benefits of the organization. If I was talking about a for-profit organization, then what they're looking for to gain is going to probably be profit here. And so what we're concerned about in a for-profit is the difference between price and costs and making sure we have profit margin. That's not quite the same take as an exchange for a nonprofit. So we've got a value proposition, all the benefits created and delivered by the nonprofit, which are then assessed by the client relative to their cost and competitive offerings. That's something to remember and to know. Two other points just to remember. In industry, we would define as a group of nonprofits that seek to meet the same need that the customer has. A market is a group of clients then that all have similar needs. So if I'm going to define a market, I would define the market based on their needs, not based on demographics and things of that nature, but based on their needs. And they would all have similar wants and interests and things like that. Now, as we wrap up and kind of finish talking about what products mean to an organization and this idea of exchange, I want to highlight some challenges that sometimes take place within a nonprofit organization. So clients and customers that use products, they do so to solve specific needs. That's what we want to focus on. And so the services that we offer are a means for our client to solve their needs. It's not our goal in and of themselves to produce the product, but it's to satisfy the need. Some nonprofits misinterpret their product and their mission. So it's wrong then to confuse your mission with the product that you produce in order to fulfill your mission. So as an example, a meal and the service you provide in serving a meal may be what a nonprofit offers, but reducing hunger is their mission. Their mission is not to provide a meal. Their mission is to help reduce hunger. And in order to reduce hunger, they happen to provide a meal as a service, to the client. But the product and the mission are two different things. The product serves the mission. Pet adoption may be the service of an animal shelter, but pet homelessness is their mission. A shelter, an animal shelter, the true mark of their success is if there's no animals actually in the shelter. If there are animals in the shelter, it means that they're not 100% successful, which of course is difficult. So their goal is actually not to have pets in the shelter. Their goal is to not have any homeless pets at all. So don't confuse the service with the mission, and make sure that those two things are properly set in their place. That's a challenge for nonprofits. Second, nonprofits may not clearly define and understand the concept of product as a manageable part of their marketing component. So a product or service is one of the 4 Ps, and it's something that should be managed. It's something that should be changed and altered and controlled. Oftentimes they don't recognize the product or service as something that is manageable or changeable, like you would think of as changing your price or changing your distribution strategy or changing, your advertising campaign. You can change your product too. And so that should be thought of as something that you can alter or change. Consider a nonprofit religious organization that offers a religious event as part of their weekly operations. That's common, of course. To the nonprofit, they believe that the event is simply an operational activity when it's actually a service. It's a product. It's something that you're providing and is absolutely manageable. The nonprofit does not manage the experience from the attendee's point of view, perhaps, and ironically, those attending view the event as a product. So the nonprofit in this particular case is viewing the church service as kind of what they do or an operational aspect of their organization, but it is in fact their product. It can be changed, it can be altered, and it can be modified because that's certainly the way the audience views it as in that sense. Think of the transition from Protestant churches in the United States who had traditionally been had a lot of distance between the audience and the minister. There were formal choirs who would sing and formal like books to read out of, like hymnals and such, to sing out of. And transitioning into a more non-traditional, I guess, delivery, of bands and informally dressed or casually dressed ministers. That's an adaptation of the product or service that reflects the needs of and concerns of the marketplace, and really views that the idea that the product can be managed and changed appropriately. The third and final component here that should be highlighted is this idea that products are the result and value is the result of what the customer does with the product or offer you provide. So in marketing literature, we have an idea called co-creation of value. And it's this notion that once a product is produced, it really doesn't do anything until the customer uses it or tries it or puts it into use. And so the value then is created by a customer when the customer uses a product or service. And so that's kind of a critical idea, that the customer is the one, or client is the one, who interprets value and ultimately defines value, and it's not the firm. Many firms and many nonprofits believe they and they alone define product value, but the way we're moving forward in terms of marketing theory is to suggest that it's really the customer that does most of this work, and that the firm can only be reactive and kind of a conduit to that value that's ultimately being created. All right, so summary time. We create something called a value proposition. We talked about exchanges and how clients and nonprofits work together, both benefiting from an exchange. We talked about 3 challenges that are associated with nonprofit value creation. Nonprofits often misinterpret their product for their mission, and they assume that their product is their mission. Nonprofits don't think of the product or the service they provide as something that's manageable or a tool in their marketing toolbox. And finally, this idea that value absolutely requires the customer or the client to first define it, and that the nonprofit or the firm itself really doesn't play much of a role other than providing the product to begin with, but they don't define value. When you think of like what value is and how you're going to think of value, it's really in the hands of the client to be able to do this. Alrighty, so this wraps up. We just had a short talk then today dealing with offers of value, unique challenges also of the nonprofit and the value creation process. Hey, if you have any questions, yep, let me know. Give me a shout out. I hope you're doing great and look forward to hearing from you soon.